Hello. I'm feeling small and disoriented today. It's August 11th, getting to a point where a lot of the work that I'm doing is starting to come together in terms of I have a big vision and I have the small steps that it's going to require to get to the place that I want to get to. And at the same time, seeing all of that, seeing the size or the magnitude of the work that I want to do, and then thinking about what that first step towards that is. It's not overwhelming, but it's putting me in this space of, I guess uncertainty is the best way to describe it. And I guess but what is certain is that I have started reaching out to some people that I know to start to do some one-on-one sessions in something that I'm calling a focus session to look at deep transformation in one particular area of your life. And I outlined what that session looked like, which is great because what I'm finding is helpful is to have a certain structure that allows for flexibility within it. Part of the standardization of things, it's something that I go through with work, for example, is when I'm working with other people, it's important to have that structure and more or less clear expectations, especially early on with something to help guide the work. And at the same time let's say for session work, it's a little bit challenging for me to have a set structure when I'm going in terms of like, okay, I'm going to go in, I'll start here, we'll talk about this thing, then we'll talk about that thing next, and then we'll talk about the other thing, and then use the same protocols or whatnot. I think what is consistent is exploring the individual that's sitting across from me. I find that very interesting and enlightening. It provides a way of connecting with somebody on a much deeper level. And I think that that's important because we're all so unique that we have our own solutions. And it's not that the solutions are different per se. I think that they are interpreted and integrated differently by different people. So the structure that I was able to put together for this focus session is good for me to give me some guide rails. It gives me that way of moving through that process. And as part of that, I was putting together a survey, an intake survey, and then also like a post-session debrief. So putting all of these pieces together, I found really interesting because it seemed like such a big thing to do. It seemed like a lot of work. And then when I finally sat down and got to it, it actually didn't take as long as I thought it would. And something about that whole process is making me feel like a little bit I don't know. It's a combination of excitement and curiosity, and it's mixing to kind of give me pause for whatever reason. It's great. I've reached out to a couple people for them to go through that survey as a pre-session intake. What I found interesting was the feedback that the survey itself was asking questions that were very deep. It was intended to do that, and at the same time, it's a bit of a space for self-reflection before a session so that you can prepare yourself for what you're about to do. Because ultimately, any change that you want to make, it's not actually done by another person, right? It's still you. And part of the survey questions part of the way that I structured that survey was to have some questions that were a little bit like confusing. So not confusing in a nonsensical way, although like some of them I do need to make some edits, but also just to get you thinking in ways that are different than the standard ways that people would write surveys. And I think that it's interesting because it helps, hopefully, to get to some of those deeper answers. I had a question on there that was basically asking what color is your favorite emotion? And then the next question was, where do you feel it in your body? And the options were yes and no. And that's the question that I want to change, because it doesn't make sense. It was intended not to make sense, but I think it makes too little sense. I wanted to focus on the idea that our feelings and emotions exist in some sort of physical space, and they have qualities to them like color and shape and movement when you pause to look at it. What is your favorite color? What color is your favorite emotion? And now that you are thinking and seeing a color, where is that emotion in your body? How is it moving? What size is it? What shape is it? What's the texture? What's the quality? Consider that. And then, is it inside you or is it outside of you? And I think that's an interesting question to ask, because I would turn that around then and consider, if you were thinking of a problem, something that you're facing right now, where is it in physical space? Is it somewhere outside of you or is it somewhere inside of you? It's a curious question, I think. At least from my frame of understanding coming into all this work, it was a curious question to ask. I had never thought about feelings and problems and thoughts and things like that as having a physical location. And at the same time, when you explore it in that way and almost like act as if they do have those qualities, you begin to notice them. And for whatever reason, it becomes more clear, it becomes more vivid as you explore those types of things. It's curious because sometimes coming from a science background, the idea that trusting in something that you can't measure directly and taking it to exist is almost something that doesn't happen within the scientific method. It's all about observation, right? And the truth is, there are many things that we refer to that we don't necessarily directly measure, or the direct measurement of it doesn't really have any specific meaning. The labeling or separation of different ideas almost locks them in. So what am I talking about? I mean, energy is one thing that comes up in my mind. If you think about energy, we can think about calories and different chemicals and maybe your mitochondria in the cell, the powerhouse of the cell, using ATP to kind of transport energy, and then stuff happens, right? So energy is a very real idea, a very real concept. And then when we think of things like thoughts having energy, or rooms having energy, or people having energy, right? We intrinsically acknowledge that it exists. And at the same time, many people don't know how to interact with that information, right? We talk about vibes. When we go into a room, like what vibes? Energy vibes. You have vibration, and that's the movement. The other thing that I think of course, is consciousness. We assume that consciousness exists, and at the same time, we don't measure it directly. It's all measured through indirect kind of correlations. So it was a big shift when I began to look at the world in that way. And what I have found is actually everything makes a lot more sense when brought down to these kind of foundational building blocks. And sometimes taking the conventional wisdom and questioning it and understanding what the root is behind all of those things. Because if something is categorized, then there was some thought process. There was a context in which it was categorized. And if that context is no longer valid, then sometimes we keep the word or the label, and the original intention or the meaning is lost. And moving from a place of labels and separation into a broader, more open interpretation of experience, it's big because there's so many pieces. It's almost like if we can separate things out and make them manageable, then we can kind of conceptualize and deal with it easier. Maybe part of that is just our limitations of our human existence. What is really interesting is then thinking about our need for connection and how we don't have to do things alone. We don't have to do things in isolation. And in fact, when we have other people that are working along with us, things can become a lot easier. So that's kind of the space that I've been in today. I've been working on structuring the different YouTube videos that I've been putting together and working on something like working on a way of coalescing these things together. And the work has been good. Like this weekend, again, I took a couple days off. So we're going to get a couple pieces of content from that. And if you're just new to this used to be like a daily series, and now I'm just logging maybe instances instead of like actual days. It'll give me a little bit more freedom to work, because one of the things that I had created for myself when starting this series was space. I had some content that was put in the bank so that I have the space to take a couple days off and come back to it, which is really nice. And like today is August 11th. I was just listening to the one that was posted today from July 23rd. And it's interesting that I was re-listening to it this morning because I just felt like, what was I going through like the last time? Like a couple of weeks ago, maybe about 3 weeks ago. It's almost like everything is cyclical. So like I was talking about time as a construct, and kind of talking about how I was getting ready to do the session at that time. And it's pretty cool to have that documentation of like, 3 weeks ago I was talking about doing a session or putting this structure together. And in that time, I've actually put it together. I've actually put together the session outline. I've actually reached out to people, which I said I was going to do as well. And then I actually created this survey. It seemed like this big thing that was like looming on me for years, and now I've put it into some kind of form. And that form can continue to shift and change over time. And that's okay. So one of the things that I guess is contributing to this factor of feeling small is like just thinking about this work here and wanting to get some of this into a format that's a little bit more structured, that also includes flexibility, to then kind of go out and create some more content that connects. So I'm like wanting to build like that continuity. I would love to have all of that. So being able to record and just simply make videos without overthinking it is a great gift, because when I have that, then it removes a barrier to doing something new. So then the planning and all this, I'm 100% sure that if I were to sit down and plan a video, and then not be comfortable in terms of filming it or worrying about framing or all of these other things, I would probably just stop. The other funny thing that I notice is I'll like to make an outline, structure things, and then by the time I have that done, I'm like, I don't want to do it anymore. So what does that say? I don't know. But ultimately I'm like floating around in like this sea of different thoughts, ideas, content, things to do. And that's why I'm feeling small today. And that's okay. I'm also excited about a number of different things, but this log today I feel like is a little bit of a downer because that's where I'm at. And I think that it's going to change because there are some really exciting things. I think one of the things that's bringing me down a little bit and that I'm really excited about at the same time is I cleaned up my office. I cleaned up and rearranged, and I'm excited to show that to all of you. But today's not the day. I'm like, oh, should I do some type of like reveal and whatnot? But I don't know. I gotta think about that. But for now, this is where it's at. So sometimes that whole idea of like resting and creating space and stopping, it really is productive. I'll talk about that in my next video, about how the space has been really productive for me in a number of different ways. And I'll see you there. For now, I appreciate your time. I appreciate your attention. Take care. We'll see you again.